April's over, so it's about that time. We're just over a month into Season 6, so it's time for the first monthly roundup. For those who don't watch the update videos, which you should since that's how you find out what's gonna come out and when, for these roundups I'm gonna go over all the episodes that were released over the past month and give my thoughts on them. The amount of time I spend on each episode will vary based on how much I have to say about them and how strongly I feel towards them, for better or worse. So let's start with Episodes 1 and 2. The big premiere. For me, the most interesting parts about this premiere were the interactions between Starlight and Sunburst, with the two of them dodging the elephant in the room between them. Starlight seems to be the only one that's reacting realistically to how quickly she was forgiven, but at this point, the show's made its bed and now it's got a lie in it. As for the birth of Flurry Heart, I think it's great that we've added another alicorn to the show. I've long since tuned out the white noise of alicorns have to be rare and special, since that notion is just tediously boring, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of Flurry, assuming that we do get to see more of her. The line about born alicorns left a lot of folks confused about whether or not Celestia and Luna are born or ascended, but considering that the line was, the birth of an alicorn is something Equestria has never seen, and Celestia and Luna predate Equestria, I don't see where the confusion lies. Yeah, Luna says that it's beyond their understanding, but that could simply mean that they've never witnessed an alicorn being born before, and since they've spent an unknown amount of time on their own, even with the Journal of the Two Sisters in mind, I can see why they wouldn't. To be pretty honest, this two-parter felt rather lukewarm to me. While it was clear that the Empire was in danger and that there would be serious consequences if the Crystal Heart wasn't fixed, the height of that danger was rather downplayed in this episode, and it lacked that tension that most of the other two-parters had. I didn't get that excitement that I would normally get out of a premiere, even the Crystal Empire, which was my least favorite premiere until now, and since one of the goals of a premiere is to get you excited or at least interested in what's to come, that's kinda worrisome. And because I know someone is going to ask, yes, I saw that black dot at the end of the premiere. A lot of people are assuming that it's a changeling, but I tend to be skeptical about these kinds of things until I get concrete information, so until I do, I'm chalking it up to an animation error. Episode 3. With this episode, Rarity has now opened her second boutique, and now we can only wonder where she'll go from here. Will Manhattan be the next city her franchise reaches? Called it. I honestly didn't feel much for this episode, positive or negative. It was pretty cool to see how much Pinky and Maud valued each other as sisters, and it was rather worrying to know that Maud had an interest in crack, but it was a really meh episode for me. The most interesting part about it was Rarity's new boutique location in Manhattan, but that was more of an excuse for the change in scenery. Thankfully, this won't be the last time we see this new boutique this season. Episode 4. The inevitable post-Cutie Mark CMC episode. Just like the event of getting their cutie marks itself, this episode was bound to happen. While I've come to like the CMC in recent years, I still thought that Apple Bloom was the least interesting of the trio, and this episode highlights the main reason why. Aside for her intense desire for a cutie mark, there really isn't much else to her. She's had the most solo episodes out of the CMC, but the only one that didn't revolve around cutie marks was Some Pony to Watch Over Me, which only showcased a desire for independence, a character trait that's a dime a dozen for child characters. Apple Bloom is a lot like her sister in the sense that she's at her best when working off of other characters, but unlike her sister, she doesn't have much that makes her an entertaining character on her own. Aside from making me realize everything I just said, this episode didn't do much for me personally. It was a necessary episode that had to happen, and aside from some chuckle-worthy jokes in the first act and a decent song from Apple Bloom, the episode was just okay. It was at this point that I wondered when there would be a Season 6 episode that really wowed me, and then we got Episode 5. I don't know what it is about even-numbered seasons and their 5th episodes, whether it's Sisterhood Social, Flight to the Finish, or this. These episodes have a constant streak of being really good, and in the case of seasons 4 and 6, they were the jumpstart that their respective seasons desperately needed. When I first read the synopsis, I was a little worried. Spike made it perfectly clear that he prefers Pony Society over Dragon Society, so why would he go back now? Thankfully, this episode alleviates that worry in a way that not only works for establishing the premise, but also leads into some great character moments for Spike, with all the scrubbiness of his character being transferred over to Garble. I know some people didn't like that Rarity and Twilight were present in this episode, but I I think it was important for them to be there so that they can witness Spike go through this experience and see for themselves the growth that he's going through. If they hadn't been there, then the episode would have likely had one of those endings where the sidekick has a great adventure where they solved everything on their own, but no one believes them because they weren't there to see it, and that really would have brought this episode down. I didn't think that I'd see a Spike episode better than Inspiration Manifestation this soon, but here we are. Can we just make it a rule that every Spike episode has to be written by Joanna Lewis and Christine Sonko, cause they seem to have a pretty good handle on it. Man, who would have thought that a Spike episode would be the one to kickstart a rise in this season's quality? Episode 6! The most recent episode so far, coming in at the very last day of April, No Second Prances, was another episode that I was worried about when I read the synopsis, and my main worry was similar to the one I had with Gauntlet of Fire, where it seems like they would contradict what was established in a previous episode. In Magic Duel, Twilight and Trixie seem to leave on amicable terms, so why would she be suspicious of Trixie if that were the case? At the same time though, if Twilight wasn't suspicious, then we wouldn't have had a conflict in this episode, and it was a good one. As I sat on it for a bit, I started to interpret this aspect of the episode differently. Having Twilight be distrustful of Trixie despite the ending of Magic Duel makes her look like a bit of a hypocrite. But what if that was the point? I mean, if you look back to the season premiere, Twilight herself said that she wasn't one to hold a grudge, and well, let's just say that if Applejack were there, she'd be giving that eyebrow the workout of a lifetime. So with that in mind, what if part of the lesson that Twilight learns in this episode is facing her own hypocrisy and self-contradiction, which would be a great stepping stone for her as she transitions into her role as a full-fledged teacher. Granted, this would have worked a little better if Starlight had called her out on it to establish that Twilight's hypocrisy was a problem to begin with, but I still think it's a valid way to view this episode. Even if my initial problem with Twilight persisted, the rest of the episode was still very enjoyable when she's not on screen. The story was written by Nick Confalone, who's written the only 2 episodes where Pinkie Pie was actually likable, and I think part of the reason why I really enjoy his work is because of the way he has the characters interact. Starlight and Trixie's dialogue felt very natural, and it made me feel that a genuine friendship was forming between them, and because of that, I wanted things to work out for them in the end. The humor is also really good, as I got some good laughs from most of the jokes, and I like how this episode shows that not every pony instantly liked Starlight, and that even her established friends have realistic reactions to her actions here. Would have been nice to have that in earlier episodes, but again, they've made their beds. So that does it for the first monthly roundup. It took a little while, but I think that Season 6 is starting to show what it can do, and I'm looking forward to what May has in store for us. So what do you think of this first chunk of Season 6? Swarm that comment section below or bug me on social media, and consider supporting me through Patreon or PayPal art commissions. Until next time, keep it sketchy, folks.